So first question, really simple, thank you for your time. If you'd just like to introduce, say, your full name and the relation you have to this pit, please.
I'm Lynn Taylor, and I was based at the accompanying colliery to this one, which was Barrow Colliery. This colliery, this one here, closed in the 1960s, and as the years went on towards the 1970s, it was realised that the coal needed to come out from somewhere else. A plan for coal was made. Barrow was getting worked out, it was over 100 years old, and so they moved in to this area, taking what was remained of the Barnsley Main coal and the Monkbretton coal, which was further over there, because Monkbretton, Barnsley Main and Barrow all used to be the same company before privatisation. So tunnels, drifts were made from Barrow to here, and from here they started getting the coal. As I say, I've worked in the engine house here, I've been underground here, but I was never a regular traveller, first of all on buses on the surface from Barrow to here, and then on the underground paddies, as we call them, underground trains.
And what was it like underground? Could you describe a day in the life being underground for us?
Well, I've worked underground in many aspects. I've crawled through sewers, I've crawled through coal faces. Underground here, the tunnels were large in most cases. The floor was a bit uneven. There were railway tracks, but unlike these here, all the sleepers were exposed, so you had to try and get into the habit of stepping on a sleeper, not between the sleeper or anything like that. But they weren't at a very good width apart to be able to step very easily. Most of the tunnels were arched, so if you were walking and the tunnel side was at that side close to you, because a conveyor belt was here, you tended to be walking a bit like that. Then others, some of the tunnels were large and square or rectangular, so walking, commuting underground wasn't very bad. Believe it or not, a lot of walking was done in coal mines for miles and miles, but whenever you could, you did an illegal ride on the conveyor belt. Second class riding is better than first class walking, or whatever the way you want to put it. Some people put it the other way.
And so what role did you have when you were underground here, for example, then?
I was a mechanical fitter. I'd served an NCB apprenticeship. I was one of the oldest apprentices that they had, because I never intended working in the coal mine. I had a job at Newton Chambers, an engineering company near Sheffield, a year before I left school. And the management, the training officers at Newton Chambers asked me, would I stay on at school and do my O-levels, because I'd already got some first year apprentices. And I says, all right then. Well, 6 months into that apprenticeship, I was made redundant, which made me 17 and a half. Panic stations, get a job at the pit. I actually signed on at Barrow Colliery as a miner. My grandfather went absolutely berserk, because he wouldn't allow any of his sons to work in the mines, and there I am, his first oldest grandson, and I've started at a pit. Well, he actually didn't work there, but he knew people there. Anyway, within a few months, I'd transferred from being an apprentice miner to an apprentice mechanic fitter. So I progressed through the apprenticeship. I attended college for, on day release for almost 8 years. I got an engineer's certificate, but I could see the end of the industry. And also, I had a young family and I didn't like working 3 shifts. So I actually left the coal industry in 1979 and worked for a brewery, and then for a long time for a water company. Towards the end of my time at the water company, I became familiar that some of my old friends were working at the National Coal Mining Museum. They wanted mechanical fitters because although it's a museum, it's still run by governance from the HSC, the Health and Safety Executive, and all the checks that we used to do in places like this daily are still done daily at the Mining Museum and have to be signed for by mechanics like myself, or fitters like myself, and electricians and management and deputies. So we check and examine and sign for everything before the museum opens. So I'm basically back to doing what I was doing in the 1970s. Installation, maintenance and repair of mechanical equipment.
And so, one of the key things I think about the stories here, for example, is it's so different to what it once was when it was operational. How different does it look to you? Like, how different does this place look? What did this place look like whenever you were here?
Well, some people who may be more familiar with this site could tell you exactly, but there were a lot more buildings than this here. There were where the air was drawn out of the mine, so a big fan venturi over there. The mechanics workshops, electric workshops. This is when I first came here, because the other side of the site hadn't been developed. A few buildings there, the entrance off the main road. The car park, although it was a car park, it wasn't smooth tarmac. But, you know, I'm thinking now 50 years ago. So you can picture it a little bit in your mind, but because I wasn't here day in, day out, there will be people who can tell you a lot more about it. Like, I only recently found out that there used to be two shafts. Well, I knew there were one shaft over there, but they've actually marked out now that there were two associated with the oaks. When I first came over here, the first time ever I came over here, I was on the night shift with the engineer, and he'd taken two apprentices because he needed to do a job because a contracting company that were working here had no fitters. So we went underground in that shaft, went down the drifts to where these contractors were working. They're using drilling machines, drilling holes, explosives are going to be placed in to blast out the tunnel. And one bloke had been working in water up to his waist. And he said to his boss, to his ganger, "I don't reckon much to this." And the ganger says, "You know, what can you do then?" And he walked. And a bit later, I'm talking to Jack, the engineer, who I'd gone with, and I says, "It's not bad if you can get wet through and then go home," he says. He was sacked. He won't work here again, and he'll be lucky to get a job in another thing. He said, but he did right, because the last thing you want to be doing is working in water. We'll get arthritis early enough in our jobs, so without, you don't want to be promoting it. It always kept me away from the contracting companies. That little instance there. Although many people went to the contracting companies because it were better money. And you were varied because you weren't at one coal mine, you moved around the lot. But when I worked over at the other end at Barrow, the coal came out in large mine cars like the ones that you see in Barnsley Centre. I don't know if you've seen it up near the Technical College. So there used to be one on each level of a 3-level cage. It would bring 3 full ones up that had to be unloaded, and at the pit bottom, the empty ones were being unloaded to put full ones on. At the pit top, once the full ones were unloaded, an empty one was pushed into its place. So I used to look after that equipment. But after my apprenticeship, I did work on the coal faces. I did work in the construction of the tunnels underground towards this mine. But all things come to an end.
And that's quite a touching sentiment. One of the last questions I really have for this one would be, actually, how did you feel when this pit was announced to be closed?
Very sad, because most of the people that actually written on that document inside the building there, most of the people I knew I'd either gone to school with or worked with here. And sad because it was vindictiveness. Coal isn't dirty. We've had 35 years of brainwashing that coal is dirty. Coal can be made clean, but the vindictiveness of the government at the time took away the technology for that clean coal, sold it elsewhere, and it's still used in other parts of the world. And it wasn't only this mine, it was every mine. I was so sad for them, and I still am, and that's why I still work in promoting what was the coal industry. And one day it might come back for other reasons, not to burn coal on open fires, although if you're born within so many miles of the Forest of Dean, then the ban that's coming in on household coal at the end of this month, April 2023, won't affect you. And you can mine coal, normal coal, and you can burn that coal in your households, and you can sell it for profit. So if they can do it, you know, it's, like I say, it needs cleaning up. I do accept it needs cleaning up, but it can be cleaned up.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so. I think now we're on the site of Barnsley Main, there's so much has changed here. How do you feel about the site now, maybe looking towards the future? How do you feel about the site today?
Knowing what it was like before the Heritage Project started, it's 1,000% better would be an insult. It's many, many, many times better than that, because they've put a lot in. I know Barnsley Council's had an input, and an ex-councillor helped start it all off. It was always, well, Barnsley Council always tended to say that this was going to be a museum site. I would like it to see so, for it to be so, but it's prone to vandalism. It will have to be very, very secure. People, the urban explorers, keep getting in that place. Thieves have been in and stolen all sorts, because I've seen the photographs. Once you lock something up, there's always a temptation for people to get into it. But for the future, I'd like to see that open as some sort of museum. And artefacts that are stored all over the country, ex-mining things, brought back if they relate to this site and put on display. It'll be very difficult, but I hope it happens.
On that note, actually, when we were talking prior to our chat now on camera, you're talking about the engine house in there. So do you know much more about what's actually in the building then?
Well, inside that building would have been the electrical switchgear controls, an electric winding engine, and the cabin for the man that drove that engine. It was a big cylindrical drum with rope on that lowered one cage down and raised the other one, so they went up and down like that. From this site here, they would take materials that were needed underground. The engine had to be maintained by fitters, by electricians. It had to be signed for by fitters, by electricians. The shaft had to be examined every 24 hours by shaftmen and blacksmiths. Every so many years, the winding engine all the brake components had to be dismantled. I actually did that here over 1-2 week period one summer, where we dismantled everything. It had been the first time it had been done since the engine was built. So we got thick layers of paint to scrape off. So using anything we could, but usually paint stripper, get all the paint off. Then technicians tested that for any metal fatigue, using ultrasonics, using dye penetrant, all the pins, all the brake calipers, everything, well, the brake shoes were all taken off. And then we had to rebuild it, commission it, because it had to be checked then thoroughly by a team of technicians that travelled all over the mines doing that. and then it was put back into use.
That's very extensive knowledge. Wow, and that'll be deeply useful to anyone interested in the subject. I think my final question actually kind of goes a bit more back towards the beginning of your career, kind of coming a bit full circle. So when you were doing your training, what actually did that encompass when you were training?
Well, just along the road there was Barnsley Main Training Centre. So once you started at the mine, at Barrow Colliery as it was for me, you were introduced to various people, taken around the surface to various places, and at some point given the chance to work in the other parts, work in the electric shop, work in the blacksmiths, work in the joiners. But I didn't, to be honest, I never got much chance of all that because of my age. It was push through, push through, push through. But this was on the surface. You couldn't go underground until you'd been underground trained. So specialist instructors would be at Barnsley Main Training Centre. You would get there at morning, a bus would take you, in my case, to Grimethorpe Colliery, where you'd go underground to learn underground safety and how to behave and to get used to travelling on the cage and everything else. Come back out, get showered, come back here, then go home. Sometimes it were 3 weeks, sometimes it were 10 weeks, depending what you were doing. But sometimes it was 16 weeks, if I remember right. But once you'd done your underground training, it was then the training officer's job, because I was still an apprentice, to get me with someone working underground and learning the way to work underground. So I did that, then a time back on the surface, then it approaching the 4 year when I came out of my apprenticeship in 1975. You've got your own coal face, this is it. Everything you've learned in your apprenticeship you tend to forget, and you learn more in the first 6 months when you're doing it yourself than many people. They teach you the basic way and how to think, how to act, how to ask the person that would normally be driving the machine what he thought it was. That sort of thing. Always use the experience of the person that's driving the machine or using the machine to tell you, because you just didn't go into it, oh I know what's up, it's all like that, because it trip yourself up and they would never allow you to forget it. Treat them with the dignity that they deserve, with respect they deserve for being able to use those machines. Listen to them and then they would help you.
It's a bit like driving, I guess, isn't it? You learn to pass your test when you're driving lessons, and then you learn to drive when you're actually
exactly.
But I think it's fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Lynn. Is there any anecdotes or any stories you'd like to share? Anything maybe you think is really it would make any stories from here, for example, for the first?
Well, it can go on forever. Still got me head of here. This will get a few people cursing, and a few people already know. In the early 1970s, a gallon of shampoo was quite expensive. It was almost a week's wage, and that gallon of shampoo should have lasted me for months and months and months. And I found out that as I were in the showers with that gallon thing, put someone showering away, my shampoo bottle were going up and down and up and down, and I was running out of shampoo very quickly. I'm thinking, there's something up here. And then I realised what was happening, so I still had my gallon bottle of shampoo, but that was kept in my dirty side locker. Handful of shampoo on my hand, onto my hair, and I took another shampoo bottle through into the showers. Inside that shampoo bottle was every liquid I could find on the pit top, including toilet cleaner and everything. Within weeks, people had got red scalps, lumps of hair falling out, and that was it. And years later, people said, well, look at that hair, they've still got it. Yeah. Well, I used your shampoo. Oh, no, you didn't. You stole what you thought was my shampoo. Just surface things. I walk away from here and I'll remember 1,000 things. But that's all. Stealing lunch, stealing snap, and it did go off often, you know. Miners weren't thieves, but were mischievous. And if someone looked to have a nice sandwich, they'd have a bite. Sometimes you did get the very, very, very rare occasions where people would go underground without any water, without any lunch to eat, and they'd nibble yours. Well, it did happen on one of the coal faces where I worked. And so my lesson was, I got a liquid laxative that used to be given to pigs and put it in the water, and I made jam sandwiches using a red coloured ant cleaner and left them for them to be found. The water disappeared and people were disappearing to the toilet, so we knew who'd taken my water, and the other people like that, so I knew who'd had my sandwiches. I could go on forever and a day. You know, I've got to try and think of the instances.
Yeah, well, they're wonderful. Like you said, I think it's wonderful that actually, because this is almost taking a bit out of. I'm referring more to the interview here when I say this, but I think what's wonderful about that is it shows this different side yet again
Yes.
to what it was like working at a colliery. I think so many people have a perception of it, so those stories are so important to hear. I think really one thing that might be nice to end on then is, well, unless there's anything you think that I've missed or anything you feel like is important to talk about, I think really is, what would you like, or you've talked a bit more about this anyway, but how would you like people to remember this place, or coal mining in general? How would you like this heritage to be preserved?
A permanently open museum here. There could be no better dedication. It's a shame that this one was the one that was chosen, because there were some that could be seen. Well, the location of this is a shame. Because it is here, it needs to be preserved. Around the district there were headgears that could be seen for miles around. That's the only problem here. And it's quiet and it's susceptible to vandalism. But get a caretaker's house on site. Get a proper museum. When it first opened, they were having music concerts and things like that here, just to try and promote the place. Well, when it first became a heritage listed or whatever it was. But those concerts were moved elsewhere. A good thing in one way, but I don't know. Anything to get the site so that it is used regularly by other people than walkers. You know, some people that's going to come in and spend, in the future, spend money here.
Good thinking, I completely agree. So,